What outlook do you have on sales leaders trying to do away with commission instead of lowering quota? When you see a sales leader get replaced, how often is it really because it's something that leader was actually doing that made it seem like they weren't ready to scale with the org? What is the number one unconventional or controversial quality to hire for in a sales rep? What is a part of the sales process or deal cycle that should never be automated away? How does an SDR stand out from the 30 plus candidates they're competing against in the interview process?
Don't use AI to write your resume.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this leadership episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club. My name is Armand Farokh, and I'm here live in studio with my co-host, Mark Kosklo, and one of our favorite guests ever, Jordan Chavez. And folks, we're going to do a special edition of the podcast. We posted a poll or some thread on LinkedIn. We're like, hey, 3 sales leaders going to answer any burning questions you have. And we got tons of them from LinkedIn, Instagram, and then also on Reddit. So we're just going to answer them across a couple of different categories. Those categories are hiring, career, and culture, training and coaching, deals and forecasting, and then strategy and ops. Mark, why should people listen?
Well, if you've ever wanted to get answers to questions like, what are some unique, interesting hiring traits? Or what are 3 books that I should read? Or how do I get my remote team to bond? That's the kind of stuff that we're going to be talking today. It's going to just be a Chipotle Bowl full of our favorite ingredients.
All right, so we're ready for this Chipotle starter, and we're going to start with a nice bed of rice. And in this case, the rice is going to be hiring, culture, and career advice. All right, so let's get the first question. So first question comes from Adia Toll, SDR. So you're both actually at early stage companies. To keep your role at a startup, your growth needs to outpace the company's growth. Otherwise, people will be hired over you. How have you seen leaders intentionally grow while they're pouring their energy into 0 to 1?
I can remember several times as I was leading teams, there became a decision. Are we going to hire internally or are we going to promote from the outside? I think the main thing that I was looking for people when I wanted to promote internally that would turn me off from outside was, how do they get along with and interact with the rest of the team? Are they someone that people respect, like, run to, talk to, initiate with? Or are they someone that's like a reluctant person? So I would tell you a lot for me around when I'm watching people grow or promoting people or things like that is I'm looking for what is their overall interaction with the culture and how they contributing to it versus just like, can they do the job? Those are obviously like, you got to have those. But I would say the first thing I would do is make sure that if you want to make sure that you're growing with the org is make sure that people are aware of your interaction and how you treat people and how they treat you.
You know, we just got off of a podcast where we were breaking down every metric a sales leader needs to know. And I think where things oftentimes start to break is people talk about the business in the same way when they're a $100,000 company as they do when they're $1 million company. So when you're going from 0 to 100K, you're talking to your CEO about how are you going to get 5 customers? And you're literally talking about every single meeting you're having with your customers. And then as you go a layer up, okay, once you're past 100K, now you're talking about like how many deals are we going to bring in this month and what are the key deals? And then once you get to $1 million, it's like, what are we going to do to add 500K this quarter? And then once you get to like 5, 10, now you're like, okay, like how do we make sure that every single quarter we're seeing incremental growth? And how do we make sure that our reps attainment is staying healthy as we scale the team up? But a lot of times people can't switch the way they think about the business. They keep talking about it the same way, but the reality is you can't look at every single deal anymore when you're in the early stages. And if you can't flip those switches every time the org ratchets up to the next level, then you're talking in the ways of the past and your CEO is going to be asking, is this the person who actually knows how to think at this level or not?
Yeah, because everything that they're doing is trying to think multiple steps ahead, right? So to that point, I think there's also a lot around communicating what your goals are as well, right? If you make it clear that you have that institutional knowledge, that's an arrow in your quiver that someone who's coming externally may not have. And I think building out some of those processes as well, like to your point, Mark, like being very clear about here's what we've been able to accomplish, and then pairing that with what is the next step and how do I actually look forward to that as opposed to, operating the same exact way.
If you're always concentrated on the problem in front of you and not looking around the corner at the next problem, then I probably need to hire somebody that knows how to look around the corner to the next problem, because we can always easily identify and fix the problems that we have. It's making sure we prevent the problems that are to come.
When you see a sales leader get replaced, how often is it really because it's just like, oh, this person isn't the person who has the resume to bring us from 10 to 100, versus it's something that leader was actually doing that made it seem like they weren't ready to scale with the org?
I think perception sometimes becomes reality in that way, but it really does depend on the founders, their understanding of the business. Also, there's external pressures on them, right? And so if there is some level of expectation about where the business needs to go from the founders as well, then there may be some of that hesitation of, has this person done it before? And do I trust that they can do it, here? And I think that's something that, it's not easy to get around, but I think to the point of continuously putting yourself in a situation where you're stretching yourself, trying to see around corners, to Mark's point, it builds that level of trust.
Like, you got to remember how the dynamics work. There's your CEO, founder, CRO, whoever, the C-suite. They're meeting with the board, and the board's job is to challenge them in their thinking. And part of that challenge is challenging, are these the right people? And the whole like, hey, what got you here won't get you there, that is a real thing. I've heard that asked in questions of me, of my leaders, probably asked about me to some of my leaders as I was doing things. And so I think helping your leaders understand who you are and why you can continue to grow is so important, because they're going to have to battle for you in those conversations. Otherwise, you're going to start saying, well, maybe we do need to hire somebody that's taking us to $100 million, and this person hasn't. And I can't tell you how many young sales leaders that I've talked to on the phone that are so frustrated. But the main mistake they made was they didn't arm their CEO or their boss or their founder with the ammunition they needed to hold off the attack from the investors or the board that was trying to challenge them into a new way of thinking.
So next question is from Sean, and this one is, what is the number one unconventional or controversial quality to hire for in a sales rep?
You got one?
Creativity. It's not easy to pull out, I think, of someone and understand how they creatively think, how they creatively act, whether it be through prospecting, through deal execution, through even post-sale success. But I think that the way that I would like to look at it or try to qualify for it is, what are those processes that they always fall back on when they are being, when they are challenged with a heavy workload, or they have a large funnel that they're trying to, execute across. And that's where they can then shine in their creativity, right? If you have those kind of core processes that you can always rely on, it gives you that freedom. And I think a lot of it comes from other aspects of their life, right? What do they like to do outside of work? Are they creative in the sense of like actually creating, videos, or do they like to paint? But also it could be from an athletic endeavor, or just anything that is inspiring to them outside of their work. I think makes people multifaceted, and it also, can relate to their motivation and like what intrinsically drives them. Oftentimes that goes well beyond just money, recognition, and title.
I watch woodworking videos on YouTube. Does that make me creative?
I think it does.
Yeah, I would say the one of the things that I identified early on at a couple companies for hiring that really made a difference was the ability to transfer passion. Can I get someone else excited about something that I'm excited about? And I think that if a rep can't get someone excited about a product that they're selling, then they're going to have to rely on just the justify with reason and not the buy with emotion part. You want to combine those two together. And the best way to get people into it emotionally is to be able to transfer your passion and excitement about something.
Yeah. I remember we would ask people, could you sell me hot cocoa on a hot beach in Florida in summer? And you get a lot of crazy answers, and you'd see if someone would get all bent out of shape and super awkward and uncomfortable, or you'd see these kids who'd like light up and they'd be like, okay, first I gotta find the people who are like running on the only track in Florida. Yeah. It's like, okay, the people who are over at the beach, and they're like finding ways like, or I could go to the gym area that's on the beach, and those people would want the fast digesting carbs of like the hot cocoa or something like that. Or I would go and I would like set up right next to an icy shop or something like that. You get a lot of crazy stuff, and I think sometimes it's just figuring out if someone could be crafty in the job.
Yeah, and do they like that intellectual exercise, or do they run from it? Because how many sales calls have multiple instances where you got to just lean into the weirdness,
Yeah, I've got a controversial reverse answer to this question, which is a lot of people like hire for hard work in sales, and I think it's probably the most overrated trait. And the reason for that is when you're hiring great people, it's table stakes that you work hard. Is I find that it's obviously you want someone who works harder than the average person, which is not very hard. But a lot of times when you hire an SDR or an AE who's just a grinder but can't think, what you get is, I'm going to make 500 cold calls this week on the wrong accounts. I'm going to make 500 cold calls this week on the right accounts, but all of the wrong prospects. And the best reps, they realize that it takes some time to think. And you need to measure twice and make sure that you're actually reaching out to good accounts so you know where to spend your time. And then you work really hard. So I'm not saying don't hire people who don't work hard at all, but a lot of times people think that, oh, this person's a college athlete and they're going to be a crazy grinder and they're going to change the world for us. And that can be true, but not if they don't use their brain at all. So this one comes from Reddit. It's really hard to get an entry-level sales job today. There are hundreds of SDR candidates nowadays. How does an SDR stand out from the 30 plus candidates that they're competing against in the interview process?
Don't use AI to write your resume.
It honestly might be a little bit better than some of the resumes I've seen. I don't know.
Listen, I think if you're trying to get a role that involves heavy rejection, heavy, prospecting, practice what you preach, right? Prospect into the hiring managers. Try and find any connection that you can. Add people on LinkedIn. I think getting creative and trying to stand out and showing that you're a human can break through the noise, right? Obviously, there's some level of skill. And if you can really think about how you translate the things that you learn in college into functional skill sets that you would be able to express in that role, that obviously that's key. But I think that communication of it lands with finding the right people, having conversations, reaching out to sales reps, asking them how they broke into that role, and just getting that perspective, I think is pretty critical.
Yeah, I would honestly not say anything differently. And I can give you the perfect story of this. I had a rep named Grace Presnick that wanted to work really badly at Outreach. And I used to drive from my house in Bothell to the HQ building in Seattle. It took me 35 minutes, and I would leave at 5:30 in the morning from my house and get to the office by 6. So a good 30-minute window where I'm capturable. Guess who called around Outreach, found out when the best time to call Mark Costolo is, and then called me at 5:45 a.m. to ask for an interview? Grace Presnick. Guess who got an interview? Grace Presnick. Guess who got the job then? Grace Presnick. And so the reason why it was so simple was she demonstrated the skill of the job to get the job. And I think that's exactly your point, right? Don't just say you have the skills. If you got them, show them.
All right, next category, we're going to go training and coaching. This one comes from Alex M., who's an account executive, also from LinkedIn. So question is, I've heard from a lot of sales leaders, they don't have time to make sure all of their reps get adequate coaching. How have you seen sales leaders effectively systematize coaching so that their reps are always getting meaningful feedback?
I think AI can be a superpower in this environment, right? And what do I mean by that? AI allows you to do things that what you're systematically doing as a manager anyway, right? You're reviewing calls, you're inspecting a pipeline, you are trying to figure out patterns that the rep is exhibiting that you can course correct on. So I think there's a lot of tools out there that allow for managers to almost scale their visibility across where are these gaps that I can find. And again, I think it's, a lot of tools give these recaps, right? Gong, good example. Outreach, there's a lot of these tools that you can, rely on. Obviously, it's ensuring that you have this repeatability, you have this expectation of, in a one-on-one, we're going to focus on these things. But ultimately, I think AI can really unlock a lot more and scale the visibility that a manager would have across their leader or across their team.
What's going on, folks? There are literally only 2 things that you need to nail as a salesperson if you want to make it to President's Club. The first is your ability to fill your calendar up with meetings and create new pipeline, aka prospecting. The other thing you have to nail is your ability to drive those deals to close. And since you've made it this far in the video, I've got a gift to help you do both of those things. If you use the code YouTube at 30mpc.com/courses, you'll actually get $50 off our 2 best courses to help you nail both the creation of pipeline and the closing of pipeline. The first course is called Cold Calls to President's Club. And in that course, we teach you what to do, what to say, and how to sound in every single part of a cold call, from your call opener to how you pitch, to how you overcome objections, to voicemails and gatekeepers and more. The second course is our discovery course, which is focused on how to sell in a way that doesn't feel like selling. And in that course, we teach you how to uncover massive 6- and 7-figure business problems that companies actually want to pay to solve. And we'll teach you the way to structure your calls. We'll teach you the questions to ask. We'll teach you how to get to the decision maker and drive timeline and make discovery something that you know how to do effortlessly. And again, if you go to 30mpc.com/courses or go to the link below and use that code YouTube, you'll get $50 off any of the courses. I will see you at President's Club.
Coaching is a cultural thing. It's like almost like a personality trait. Like are you a teacher and is that part of who you are or not? I can remember sales orgs I've been a part of where the leader just didn't care about coaching. And there was never going to be any coaching in that organization. It was, you got to figure it out yourself. I've been in part of, and I think I lead sales organizations where coaching happens every minute of every single day at every single level because it's just like who we are and what we do. And I think if you're in an organization that doesn't have coaching, you need to look at your leaders. Are they just not creating an intentional process and rhythm around coaching? In which case, go to them. Be like, we all want more coaching. Like at my last job, I have a cultural guy that I bring in that handles all my cultural stuff. And part of what he does is, one is every team meeting, we have a 15-minute session where they go over some trait. And then every 2 weeks, we have a skill up level meeting where we have an hour-long thing. And then once a month, we have a group team call where we all coach each other on this call. We don't do that because it's just something to check off. We do that because we want to get better, right? And so I would say that's the main thing is are you actually in an organization where it's a cultural thing and it's just not being processed correctly, or is there no chance of ever coaching because it's just not part of the culture?
My biggest thing here is it needs to live inside of a rhythm. Mm-hmm. So you can't be looking for random acts of coaching, right? Because that by definition doesn't scale. So anytime I wanted to coach my reps on prospecting, it would either happen in the Monday morning meeting where we would have something called the 5-minute squeeze, and we'd break down one tactic in 5 minutes that booked a meeting, right? Or it would be in a Tuesday cold call review session. And every Tuesday, the team was bringing calls or emails to the table. If I wanted to review a discovery call, we had Friday tape reviews over lunch. And then if we wanted to run a sales training, there was always a monthly sales builder that was breaking down one big topic. From there, you get your reps to bring the coaching to you. So if you do a good job, you're not the one going and chasing down all the deals and not chasing down all the calls to review. You're giving your reps assignments. You're saying, anytime we go into a deal review, I expect you to bring your top 3 deals in these types of stages and tell me where you think you need help on de-risking the deal. Or if you're having a rep who's an SDR, you're like, I want you to come to every single one-on-one with 2 call recordings or a diagnosis of where you think you're struggling, and then we'll start there. So try to get your reps to bring the coaching to you so that you don't have to go and fish for the coaching. You can just coach.
I'd actually even combine both of those, right? I think the operating cadence and what you're speaking to is a lot of that psychological safety that allows reps to feel that they can bring that to their manager, right? It's not a fear of, oh, if I show a call or if I try to get feedback on something where I just completely miss the mark, that I have some risk of being seen as not effective and maybe my job's at risk or any of those things, right? So that psychological safety through a culture of continuous improvement, of actively seeking feedback, I think is very critical. So I would say a combo of the both.
Yeah, I had a really cool thing that we did called, and if you text 3 emojis, they're larger, but if you do the 4th emoji and they get small. So the biggest compliment you could give at one of my companies was 3 fire emojis, because that's the most fire it could be. So we had the meeting called the 3 fire emoji meeting, and we had a deck, is a running deck, and by the end of it, it was probably 200 slides long. And every week, what we would do is we say, take something boring in the platform and make it fire. Demo it to me in a fire way. And it was a rep's job to sign up for that and to lead that 15, 30-minute meeting and be like, okay, hey guys, I know putting people into sequence and outreach is super boring. I'm going to make it fire. And they would create something that was everyday and mundane and just make it so hot and cool. And our reps, that was like the favorite training meeting that we had, is the 3 fire emoji meeting.
This comes from Ian Donahue, regional sales manager, also from LinkedIn. Ian's asking the 3 most relevant books for sales reps, leaders today.
The most influential book early in my career was a book called The Little Red Book of Selling by Jeffrey Gitomer. The whole gist of the book is be creative and fun and be yourself while you're selling. And I'll never forget, he taught me, hey, don't just go do something. Like, think of an interesting way to do it. I had 250 schools in my sales territory. 100 of them were big accounts. I bought 100 deal or no deal suitcases. And inside of it, I put all the materials that I normally would just drop off at the school, but I put them inside this case with a little note on it that said, I got a deal for you. I signed up 3x the number of meetings just by being creative versus just dropping my stuff off and leaving and saying, check the box, right? So be creative and fun. I think it matters a huge deal. The second one is a more recent book called The Jolt Effect. I think The Jolt Effect taught me about, there's 2 real main parts. There's the, I have to decide to buy, and then I have to make sure that I am overcome all the political and reluctant stuff that I need to do in order to make sure that I buy. So I think that when I have our sales process, the sales process I institute, I actually took stages and said, this is us getting the intent to buy, which we need to give people data and stuff to help them understand why they need to buy. And now we need to get over their decision reluctance. And actually, you do less data and less inputs and more guiding and recommendation in that part of the sales process. That was pretty revolutionary for me. And then the last is a book about how the brain works. It's called Think Fast and Think Slow. And the gist of that is there's 2 parts of your brain, system 1, system 2. System 1 is dumb, reactive, and looks for patterns. System 2 is smart, can do intellectual and statistical level thinking. And most of us operate in our system 1 brain 90% of the day. And so when we're selling, you're usually selling to the dumbest part of somebody. You have to figure out how to way to get into their smart part, or you're never going to get them to change their behaviors.
I'm gonna pivot. I think I have 2 more business related books, and then one that's a personal book related to running, which I'm very passionate about. So the first, I'm gonna go with the personal. Bowerman and the Men of Oregon. Reading it right now, I've read it multiple times. It's a really amazing story of Bill Bowerman, legendary track coach at University of Oregon. And a lot of it is about bringing something completely new to not just a team, but a society, and how you have to take risks very early on. And then really a lot of it is how he coaches his athletes, right? How he thinks about creating specific coaching programs that the athletes respond to. And I think what it teaches is really just, you can't have a one-size-fits-all program, right? The real great coaches and great leaders are ones who lean in. They deeply care and empathize with their athletes and want them to be successful and can curate what feedback and how they motivate them. The other would be Hard Thing About Hard Things, Ben Horowitz. Great book just around understanding, how we create and how culture is, not just instilled in an organization, but grown and evolved over time. And then the last would be Amp It Up, Frank Slootman. I think if anything you want to take away from that, the real, even if you don't want to read the book, short snippet that he's posted on LinkedIn is the kind of passengers and drivers. It really, really exhibits, how you can really tell when someone is leaning into a problem, a challenge, and someone who takes a back seat, someone who typically is going to wait and react as opposed to take ownership and press forward.
I've got a couple. So I'll go 2 sales and then 1 non-sales related. So for discovery, I read a lot of books, and honestly, I didn't love a lot of them. The one book that I enjoyed the most was Gap Selling by Keenan. And I would say that this isn't the best beginner's discovery book, but it's you're leveling up to mid-market enterprise book, because you can get through SMB selling, solving operational problems and technical problems. But if you can't speak to board level problems, emotional problems that a VP is going to have to report up to a CEO, you're never going to be able to sell a big 5-figure or 6-figure or 7-figure contract.
For sure.
And so gap selling is all about, you need to understand the current state, the future state, quantify the gap. And it gives you a bunch of different ways that you can ask questions to do that. So that's one. Selfishly, number 2, if you want to prospect, I hear this book, Cold Calling Sucks, and That's Why It Works, is pretty good. That's a good one. You might check it out. Link in the show notes. Affiliate link. I know the guys who wrote it. Great dudes. And then number 3, So this is going to be like the most boring book you ever read, but a lot of people who are listening to this are in tech sales. And I think my ability to talk about how startups work and how venture investments are made just gives you a degree of lingo that you need when you're speaking to a board or you're speaking to a CEO, where you understand what growth expectations look like round to round. You know what fundraising means for your company. You're just a little bit more articulate at the executive level. There's a book called Venture Deals that breaks down how VC investments are made. And it literally breaks down a term sheet step by step. And it's really boring for most people. I loved it because I'm a nerd about it. So that's one. And then number two, this is one that I read afterwards, which is 10% happier. So when I quit my job as a VP of sales, I was as burnt out as could be. And so I sold everything that I owned and I moved to Hawaii to live in a hut. And I was just like, so I spent my entire 20s chasing this career goal of VP before 30. I got it. And I had never been more miserable in my life. And so I read this book called 10% Happier. And it's about this guy who's an extremely well-known news anchor who has an anxiety attack on air in front of like millions of viewers. And he goes through this whole meditative journey where he learns to, one, like meditate and create a little bit of distance between his emotions and his actions, right? Just creating that space between noticing how you're feeling and then acting on it instead of reacting without losing your edge. And that's what I liked about it a lot. It really helped me keep my intensity, but notice when I was getting too intense and just bring it a little bit back in line. I've held a leadership role for years, but I can't seem to break out of 90% of my role being an IC. My passion is coaching, building, and growing, but I feel like I'm getting caught in the weeds of the day-to-day.
Sometimes the day-to-day is a black hole, and sometimes you have to go into it. But I think that if you want to take a step forward in your career, there's seasons where you have to just work harder. And it sounds like to me, you may be time bounding yourself in a way that only allows you to get to the stuff that's here and now versus saying, listen, I'm going to take a couple hours at night and do this other stuff in order to start to open up and show fruits of that would give somebody the ability to say, we should have this person do more of those things. So listen, a little tough love. I would say probably time to put in some extra hours to get out of the day-to-day and get yourself into the other stuff to start to show that there's real value in you spending time there, not just in the day-to-day.
All right, this one comes from Jonah Stromer, Senior Director of Sales, also on LinkedIn. What is a part of the sales process or deal cycle that should never be automated away? I see a lot of products that try to fully automate sales coaching, where it's like automated coaching insights so that the sales manager can just go to Tahiti or something like that. Or like you're on a sales call and it's like, here's this talk track you should use right now. And it's just like a massive distraction. And I think if AI is going to be used in coaching, where it is used best is it's identifying the opportunities and then letting the coach go coach. Like not actually delivering the coaching and the feedback to the rep itself, at least where it is today. I've seen a lot of solutions in search of a problem where people are coming up with these AI automated sales coaches, and I don't hear people asking for those things. The biggest thing that is challenging as a sales leader is knowing where to focus your time. And I think AI can do that, but actually going and delivering and packaging the coaching, I see that being very far away from where it needs to be today.
Yeah, and I think what is it about people that motivates them to change? Yes, it is, I see that there is a way in which I could be better, but a lot of it's emotional, right? And you only get that from having a coach who A, cares about you and is open to giving you radical candor, right? That care has to be there. Otherwise, they're just a-hole, right? But B, it is, if you feel that emotion deeply, it's going to stick with you a lot longer and it's actually going to motivate you to change.
Yeah, I think that if you look at all the individual parts of a sales process, I think they're all probably automatable. But I think what happens is the more automation you stack up on top of a process, the less human interaction and human relationship is actually created. And so I don't know if it's as much about what shouldn't be automated. It's about how much should you automate to make sure that you protect the most important thing in sale, which is the human-human relationship and connection that is required to create trust enough to make a buying decision in a political organization bent against making buying decisions, which is what every customer is, right? So I would just say, I don't know if there's anything that shouldn't be automated. I just think that there's a level of automation where you cross a line and now you're like not really giving the buyer a chance to understand who your people are.
This comes from Dhruva Noel, founding SDR. Okay? What outlook do you have on sales leaders trying to do away with commission instead of lowering quota, for example? Which I don't know if those are the two alternatives. It's like either no commissions or lower quota. I would say this. Let's taper this down to what outlook do you have on sales leaders who are trying to do away with commission and have just flat? It's like the Tesla sales model.
I think that there's two types of jobs. There's project-oriented jobs, and then there's people-oriented jobs. A project-oriented job is where I sit down as a programmer and I work with my computer to create an output that's valuable to the company. It's just me and nothing else. That's a project, right? Then there's people-related jobs where I'm a seller trying to get an outside person to do something different, right? And changing somebody else's behavior to get a behavior that I want out of it is extremely difficult. I think project-related jobs work really well on a pay system because it's like, this is how much productivity you need to create. The only thing keeping an engineer from creating that is themselves because it's just them and the project. When you're a person trying to get another person to do something else, I think that's so hard that there has to be an extra intrinsic motivation, and that can be money or whatever, that makes you push through the complex because it's very difficult to just plug into the system and make things work, right? You can't just work the sales process and all of a sudden you hit the number. There's a lot of other stuff that is outside of your control. So I think that what commissions do is they sharpen a rep's perception of what do I need to do to get enough people to change to do what I want to do versus a project person, which is more just like, what do I need to do myself to get this work done today? I think those are two very different approaches. And I think sales leaders that are trying to put project-based pay plans on human-based roles will get project-based results, which will suck.
All right, folks. I think let's actually call it right there because we went through a ton of different questions. So folks, if you like this bit, what I would recommend you do is we send out random Q&A polls and stuff like that on our Instagram. So down in the show notes, go check out the 30 Minutes Presence Club Instagram if you like this bit. And also down in the comments on Spotify, let us know what you think about this bit. We're thinking about doing more Q&As like this. So we would love to hear what your burning questions are on the next episode. And we will see you next week. Peace.